So good morning, everyone. This is Howard County Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. Welcome all the committee members and also our guest speakers. Today, the first item on the agenda is a little bit unique. It's not going to be just a PowerPoint presentation. It's a business panel discussion that's going to be facilitated by Larry Twell, our Executive Director of EDA. And welcome also our panelists for that section. And following that, there will be Brandy, our Director of DTCS, to talk about IT operation and budget needs. And then Community College and Library will brief the committee on their tentative or preliminary budget request. So we'll start with the business panel. Larry, let me hand it over to you. Host, can you make Larry the co-host or whoever who can handle the PowerPoint and other things? Larry, can you try to share the file on the screen?
All right.
And while Larry's pulling out that, just a kind reminder that if you don't speak, everyone, please mute yourself. And when it's your turn to talk, then you can unmute yourself. And the first section, by the way, is going to run like about 45 minutes, and then we will go to the next session, which is DTCS. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, Holly, can you see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Well, thanks for having us in today. Doing a little bit of a different presentation today from what maybe you've seen in previous years from EDA. We're approaching this from the premise that building the commercial tax base is an important part of your report and part of your thinking, and some of the deserves some consideration as you are looking at the both revenue and expense side of the county's budget. I'm going to run through some slides just for some context. Then we're going to have Amy Gowan and the folks from DPZ talk for a quick minute about some land availability and the master plan. And then we're going to go into our business panel just so you hear from some of a developer and user perspective, some of the opportunities and challenges we have in terms of building our commercial base. So let me get started because time is short. Just for context, employment growth over the past 10 years, blue line is Howard County. We've outpaced the state and U.S. In terms of rate of growth and employment change. Obviously, this last year has thrown you're going to see a lot of numbers for this past year. No explanation necessary, you know why, but historically we have been growing faster than than the average in terms of job growth in Howard County. Resident job growth, meaning the more of our residents actually work here. That rate of growth has been growing also. Still about only a third of our residents live and work in the county, but it is steadily growing. Unemployment over the past 10 years, Howard County typically leads the state in terms of its low unemployment. And you see it was, at a low of, 2.7 just a few years ago, 2.4 last year, spiked up this year, but still lower than our averages. Here's the unemployment rate for the past year. It jumped up to over 8%. Now is slowly coming down to some of the more levels that we're more familiar with. Our top employment sectors. Just to remind you where the concentration of our jobs are: professional business services, government, trade, transportation, utilities, as we compare against that percentage to the state. Here's where our jobs have been growing, and the 10-year, this is our current number of jobs in these categories, and the 10-year growth rate. Just to remind you, though, while we have a lot of our employment sectors are in high-paying categories, we still, majority of our businesses are, small businesses, fewer than 20 employees. 82% of our businesses have fewer than 20 employees. Just over the past couple of years, the projects that we have been working on since 2016, we've worked on 240 projects, creating or retaining over 11,000 jobs. The measures we really look at are new jobs, retained jobs, capital investment, square footage, and technical assistance are the ways we help our businesses. Here are projects that we've worked on in those categories over the past several years: new jobs and retained jobs, and the trends over the past several years. Square feet. This is the consumption. These are the businesses that are new or expanding in the county, and how much square feet they are consuming. Capital investment. These are the dollars that those businesses are investing in their projects. Technical assistance cases are it's the day-to-day outreach and assistance we provide businesses. It can be everything from permit assistance, regulatory, financing, workforce development. Obviously, this past year we've done a lot of technical assistance with our small businesses, helping them through the pandemic. The top industry sectors that our projects are in: cyber, information technology, manufacturing, retail, healthcare. Some of our recent projects over this past year, some names that you'll recognize. The reason we put this up here is this is a diverse, our projects are very diverse. It's manufacturing, it's distribution, it's technology, and cybersecurity, and food distribution. Just a quick look at our real estate market, vacancy rate, and dollars, the rent per square foot. We can see it. We've had very healthy low vacancy rates over the past several years, and also our rents have been increasing. These are two strong indicators for outside investment, and it drives development. A good vacancy rate is about 10% or less. That means you have not too much supply, and developers start to look at markets where there is less than 10% vacancy, because there needs to be more inventory on the shelf. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about growing the commercial base. This is an important part of what goes into your report, and just to give you a sense of what does it take to grow the commercial base. Here's a historic glance of the commercial tax base as it relates to the total assessable base. You can see how it's steadily grown over the increments of the 5 years or so. We're now at about our total share of the commercial base as it relates to the assessable base is about $9.5 billion. Here's a drill down in more recent years, how that assessable base has steadily grown. When you compare it to the entire assessable base, we're at about 17.9, call it almost 18% of the commercial of the total base is attributable to the commercial assessments. Here's how we rank in terms of our other neighboring counties. Baltimore City at a high of almost 22%. We rank at number 9. Now this is state data. So where you see 15.7%, this is how our numbers compare apples to apples to the other jurisdictions in the state. When you look at total dollars of that assessable base, where we rank a little bit higher in terms of just actual dollars at number 6. When you take commercial base per capita, we rank it even a little bit higher. So while 17 or percent or so might not be as high as we like, it still is a fairly high ranking as it relates to per capita. We're a smaller county with a lot of highly assessed property. I'm going to go through a quick exercise in terms of growing the commercial tax base. These are numbers that we just looked at. Total base for 2020 was about $53 billion. 9.5 of that is attributable to the commercial base, which gives us, that's how we arrive at the 17.9%. If we wanted to grow the commercial base by 1%, okay, we would need an additional $614 million of things to assess. What does it take to get to that number, to get to that $614 million? You're all familiar with the MedStar building. It's one of the new buildings in downtown Columbia. It's 213,000 square feet. It's assessed at about $40 million. Basically, what that means is for us to increase our commercial base by 1%, we would need 15 MedStar buildings. And that's just a way of putting into more tangible terms, what does it really take to grow our commercial base? Excuse me. If our annual office absorption was about 300,000 square feet a year, it would take almost 10 years to fill those buildings. Just want to quickly talk about future development. Where are we focused? Obviously, downtown Columbia is a focus for us. Maple Lawn is a focus, but it is running out of room in the Route 1 corridor. Obviously, for our industrial projects, we see Gateway as an opportunity for Howard County as well to reposition the Gateway Columbia Gateway District into an innovation district. It's over 900 acres. 60% of Gateway is open space. 20% of it is surface parking. There are 155 acres of building footprint in Gateway. There's over 200 acres of just surface parking. So obviously, a lot of potential for Gateway to become more dense and higher and better uses. If you take a look at downtown Columbia, inside of Gateway, this is just to give you a sense of scale, how big and what the opportunities can be in Columbia Gateway. There's your 900 acres, and we've nested inside of that. That's what downtown Columbia looks like. So you can fit almost 2.5, 3 downtown Columbias inside of Gateway. Just a quick, example of, most of Gateway is single-story buildings. Their road access and higher density is an example of how Gateway can be better utilized. So, in terms of growing the commercial tax base, those are there's obviously a lot of challenges to that. COVID-19 certainly has thrown a wrench into things. What is the future of the office and industrial market? There is a lot of companies have figured out how to work remotely, and what is their office demands going to be moving forward. That's going to impact office demand to some extent, and we don't know. There are a lot of speculation about what the office market is going to be, but obviously that's a challenge for us. There's uncertainty. There's a lot of growth in the industrial market, however. A lot of e-commerce and distribution projects are picking up, and that will support commercial base. However, we have challenges fulfilling a lot of our industrial market needs. Restaurant and retail uncertainty. Obviously, COVID-19 has put a lot of question marks into what it means for the future of restaurants and retail, and the availability of distribution. And that we're seeing increase in the industrial market, but just our availability to satisfy that need. We're going to talk about land availability, and Amy Gowan and the folks from DPZ are going to jump in here in a moment and talk about our land availability. We see, a lot of projects. This is a short list just over the past year. of projects that we haven't been able to satisfy because of the land availability, the scale. Large parcels are difficult to come by, are in demand, difficult to come by, and we're missing out on opportunities to grow jobs and grow our tax base. Had a research and development campus, look, they wanted to be in Howard County. We just do not have 40 acres for them. A data center campus, looking for 100 acres for 200 jobs. We have an existing research and development business looking for 10 to 15 acres. And they have 353 jobs now. They're looking to grow. We can't satisfy their need. And we have an existing manufacturer that's looking for 30 acres, 200 jobs, and we can't satisfy their needs. So just to give you a sense of some of the challenges that we've got the business, we just don't have the product on the shelf. And then we're going to talk about some legislative things, and we'll get into that with the business panel. So with that, I'm going to ask Amy and her team to jump in on the speak about the land availability and the master plan process.
Thank you, Larry. Can a host make Amy, or is it Amy or Jeff is going to run from your own screen, right?
Yes, if you don't mind. This is Jeff Browno. I'm going to start, and then Amy's going to talk a bit about the general plan also. So if I could have the ability to share my screen, I can bring up a presentation. Thank you. Perfect. Okay.
That's a nice picture.
Yeah. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, you mean my screen saver? Yes. Thank you. Yes, it's a beautiful landscape. Thank you. So, thank you, Larry. That was a very nice overview of where things are currently. Sets a really good context of something that we're going to be presenting. So Larry had asked us to put together some information about future land use potential. We're actually focusing on the general plan right now, so we're sort of gathering this information and putting it together. So EDA asked us to create this map here, which you see in front of you, which is really looking at all completely vacant. So it really doesn't look at redevelopment potential of this particular map, but it's vacant land, commercial and industrial properties that are greater than 3 acres. As Larry indicated, and you saw in one of the slides, there was some missed opportunities given the large acreage is requested for some future potential new office or new industrial development opportunities in Howard County. So given the limited land supply, we face a challenge in Howard County. We've had a fair amount of office growth the last 10 years, primarily due to Fort Meade growth and BRAC. That has largely ended. And with that also, with the development, the amount of land available in the future is in short supply. So we do face challenges, and the next general plan will largely be focusing on redevelopment opportunities. This is sort of a data, the total acreage on that map. So you can see from that map, it's about 450 acres of industrial and commercial properties greater than 3 acres. The number on the left, the 410 there, is taking away steep slopes and floodplains, so that you can't develop on those. This list also, just to keep in mind that this is basically raw land. So to determine whether or not the sites are feasible, that would require further work. But overall, there's about 400 acres of land, 3 acres or greater. Now, what we're doing with the general plan effort that we've been involved in the last year or so, and it's going to continue for another year. The general plan is updated every 10 years or so. We're starting to look at developing scenarios. So this is, you can consider this sort of a draft of what we're looking at in terms of job projections for the next 20 years. It's a lot of numbers, but I just want to focus on a few things here to set the context. So if you look at the acres capacity just to the left of that little red box, the 656. It's greater than the 400 or so that I said before. This includes all undeveloped land, including those that are less than 3 acres, because you could have a little bit of potential for development on 3 acres. So you have 656 acres of undeveloped land capacity. In addition to that, what's not included in the undeveloped land is the downtown Columbia redevelopment potential. So if you look at the downtown plan, that's what's left in terms of the plan. What the plan outlines in terms of square footage is about 4.7 million square feet of future office space. About 6.2 million square feet total is in the plan, and 4.7 is left. The difference is already been built, including the MedStar building that Larry mentioned earlier. So there's a ways to go. It's always been considered to be a 30-year plan. It was adopted in 2010, so we're about a third of the way through. So we have potential in downtown Columbia. If you add that total to the undeveloped land capacity, that's where you get this total here. So basically, there's a total capacity of about 10 million square feet if you take the undeveloped land plus downtown Columbia, and you apply a jobs per acre figure, or a square foot per jobs per acre figure, which translates into square feet. So it's an estimate. If you look at the total job potential, given the capacity plus downtown Columbia, it's about 28,000 jobs. Now, if you divide that by 30 or 20 years, that's about 1,500 jobs per year or so. That's about half of what the last general plan projected. The last general plan targeted about 3,000 jobs per year beginning in 2010 to 2030. We've actually, if you look historically, we've actually had more than 3,000 jobs per year on average the last 10 years, largely because of BRAC and 4B growth. There's been a lot of office space. So in relative terms, compared to the past, we're going to slow down in the future, and that will have fiscal implications to the county moving forward. Last thing I want to talk about in the slide was there's an RCLCO market study that was conducted that's part of our general plan consulting team. RCLCO is a company that does market studies. They're a real estate firm. And so they did a market study for Howard County, and that study, if you're interested, is on the HOCO by Design website. But what they're saying is that the demand is about 16.5 million square feet for the next 4 years. So if you look at what our capacity is, including downtown Columbia, which is actually, by the way, a big percentage. So of the 10 million square feet, almost 5 million of it is downtown Columbia. So the question is the market going to be such that office space is going to come to fruition in downtown Columbia? But it's still about half of what we project. So if you include that, it's still short of what RCLCO, the market demand is. So that's the reason why we're going to focus on redevelopment opportunities. Larry mentioned Gateway. That's a great opportunity for future office demand, et cetera. One of the big things that stands out here is the difference between what RCLCO market demand says, 7.5 million for industrial manufacturing warehouse. So there's a big demand for that, but we're far short in the supply. Office, we're short, but not too short, relatively speaking, in large part because we have downtown Columbia. But the data warehouses and things of that nature, which are in large supply, we have the Route 1 corridor, we have good transportation networks near the rail stations. There's a lot of demand for this kind of space, particularly with the whole Amazon type phenomenon, right? So manufacturing distribution. So this is one of the things that we're short in Howard County compared to the market. The question is, of course, what's the fiscal impact of that? Office clearly has a greater market value, so it's a better product from a fiscal perspective. The industrial manufacturing warehouse, that's in demand and it provides jobs, which is a very good thing as well. So I want to quickly end here. So this is just from the RCLCO market study. Currently, we have 223,000 jobs. They're projecting 60,000 jobs demand. We have capacity for 30,000. So they're basically projecting twice as much market demand than we have capacity for, not counting the redevelopment opportunities that we're going to try to develop with a new general plan, HOCO by Design. this is the commercial space I just outlined. That's the 16.5 million square feet that they're saying we have a market for moving forward. And this is the main job sectors that are going to be in demand, that are going to fill that 16 million square feet of space. Primarily professional business services, which makes sense. That's the largest base now, and it's going to continue to grow moving forward. Education, health services, and you can see the rest there. And then this is the last slide. This shows the relative difference of what the demand is. I mentioned this. This is the greatest demand according to RCLCO, and this is also where we have the shortest amount of zoned industrial land. So this will be a challenge moving forward. With that, I'd like to end it now, and then Amy Gowan is going to talk about Howard County's next general plan.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. Amy Gowan, Director of Planning and Zoning. Just wanted to share a few slides today on a major effort going on with the county, which is our general plan update, which we're calling HOCO by Design. We launched this when the guidelines were adopted in July of last year. So we're a little less than halfway through the process. But this is a really unique opportunity. It's a once in a decade opportunity to look at how the county wants to accommodate some of the demands that Jeff just ran through in his last slides. Jeff, could you advance the slide, please? And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with the general plan, but I just wanted to briefly review that. It's a long-range visionary document, and it basically guides our land use decisions across a 20-year horizon. And it looks at land use, transportation, open space, agriculture, community character, historic preservation, housing, economic development. Clearly not an exhaustive list, but these are the types of major policy areas that are addressed with and comprehensively. So that's the key with the general plan. It's the county's one opportunity to look at these things in a comprehensive fashion. And it looks at how we plan to develop and grow to adjust to evolving economic, environmental, and social conditions. And it's basically forms policies and goals which help inform our capital budget decisions, our zoning decisions, our land use regulations, and other legislative decisions that the county makes moving forward. One of the things that we do, and which Jeff was just sharing with you, is we look at demographic and population projections, and we try to assess, well, what's our capacity to meet them? And what demand does that create on our infrastructure, our roads, our schools, utilities, and how do we meet deficiencies through that effort? So we're looking at how this growth impacts our community facilities and trying to identify where we may be able to best accommodate it. Next slide, please. And so, you know, this is probably one of the main pieces of the plan that we're actually working on right now. But for relevance to this group, the method we're using to determine where and how the county would like to accommodate growth over the next 20 years is a process that we're using called a scenario planning process that generates different potential futures for the county. So basically, the scenario planning is a quantitative process, and we're using a land use visualization software called Community Viz. And so it contemplates and kind of asks questions about, you know, how should the county grow? How much will growth cost? Where do we want to grow? And what happens is we'll come up with various different scenarios, and we'll run impact analysis, looking at not only the fiscal impacts of those scenarios, but also the impacts on different infrastructure, such as water sewer capacity, transportation, et cetera. And then our plan will be to take these different growth scenarios to the public in March for a growth scenario workshop. And from there, we will seek to develop what a hybrid. So basically asking the public to identify the components of each scenario that are most favorable to them, most desirable. That will help us to kind of hone in on a final hybrid scenario. And I really think that this is something that this Spending Affordability Committee would have a lot of interest in, since we will be modeling the fiscal impacts of these different growth scenarios. So for example, we might look at like a business as usual scenario and identifying the fiscal impacts to the county on that. And on the other side of the equation, we may look at like a transit-rich scenario and you know, what type of density would be needed to accommodate something like that. So if this is something that the committee is more interested in, we could happily run through some of our draft scenarios at a future meeting if it's at all desired. Next slide. And so, as I mentioned, ultimately we will a hybrid scenario will evolve through community input, and that will really inform a new land use map, which we're anticipating will be much more detailed than our current land use map. It's not quite a zoning map, but we're looking for it to contain different types, locations, patterns, intensities of development, and kind of get into different typologies such as suburban commercial and suburban office, and identify where those locations might occur within the county. And the final document, the ultimate plan, will ultimately take that map. It will outline the near, mid, and the long-term steps that we need to take to try to achieve the 20-year vision for growth and development. Next slide. So this is just kind of an overall, give you an idea where we are in the process. You see we're in that scenario, the right smack in the middle is the scenario and modeling testing, which we're knee deep in right now. As I said, we plan to, once we're done with the results of that, we plan to release that, have a workshop with the public in early March to go through the different growth scenarios and the impacts of each. And then from there, we'll be kind of refining our growth framework. We'll have some strategic advisory committees in the spring that will be trying to tackle some of the more complex issues. And our goal is to have a draft ready by the end of the summer for adoption by the end of the year. I didn't even touch the surface on all the community engagement we did to get to this point, because just for lack of time today. But again, I'm more than happy to come back and give a more comprehensive presentation of the project if desired. And finally, if you could just hit the last slide. In the interim, if you are interested, I know we have some members of this committee that are on our planning advisory committee, so this may be a little repetitive for you, but for others, check out our Facebook page. If you go to our website, hocobydesign.com, and you register, you'll get all the updates about the process and when there will be opportunities for public input. And again, probably the next big opportunity will be in March. We would love to have definitely this committee's feedback and involvement, because we really do need to consider the fiscal implications of the different growth scenarios. And I know this committee is very informed in that regard. So thank you so much for your time today. And I guess I'll turn it back over to Larry.
Thanks, Amy. I mean, very important process. HOCO by Design. You know, I think having you come back for a deeper dive for this committee is important. You know, planning, you know, the pressures of balancing the growth are, you know, it's you guys are doing a lot of good work over there and setting the roadmap for the future. Yes, you know, our residents need jobs, and they both have to fit somewhere. And you know, obviously we're in the redevelopment business, so you know, see that we can't manufacture new land, so how do we accommodate that growth that Jeff was talking about? What we've done is we have put together a business panel, just you know, so you get to hear from their perspective, you know, development and how to do development, how development works in Howard County. We have with us today Tom Pilon, who is Senior Vice President of Development for St. John's Properties and a Howard County resident. I asked Tom. St. John Properties is the main developer for Maple Lawn. They do retail, flex space, office space, industrial space. So the product that they build, they really cover the spectrum of large businesses, small businesses, and they do a lot of work in the county. We have Tom Valentine, who's Vice President of Government Affairs for NAIOP. It's the National Association for Industrial and Office Properties. Chuck Phillips, Howard County resident and principal at KCI Technologies. Howard County resident, has his business in Howard County, but also does business all across the country. And Leonardo McClarty is going to be joining us as well, and obviously Leonardo from the Howard County Chamber. I'm going to just kind of throw out a question to get the conversation started, but obviously the group can certainly, if you have questions for these folks, please jump in. But for Tom Pilon, there he is. Tom, okay, from a developer's perspective, all right, what do you see? You do work all across the state and other states as well. What facilitates or encourages development? How do you guys look at a development project? Where do you like to take opportunities? What are the things that give you that confidence in the market, that decision to do something in a particular jurisdiction?
Well, I guess I'd start with, we have pretty strong confidence in this general market. We've been working at St. John, started his company here in 1971 in Baltimore, and we've expanded into Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Carroll County, Harford County. We're as far south as St. Mary's County. That's out of our Baltimore office. So we found a lot of opportunity in the general area, and I think we've been pretty enthused by it. As far as kind of where it feels the best to do development and things like that. Howard County, I would say, has not been the process is what I describe as rigorous but workable. So there's a very thorough process, but you can get over all of the obstacles as they come along, whatever those things might be. We don't do as much in residential, although I say that we're not residential developers, but we have about 3,000 residential units in our residential units in our pipeline, because we have two mixed-use developments, but neither one is in Howard County. We have one in Prince George's County and one in Baltimore County. We've been involved in Maple Lawn, as Larry, you're well aware, but there we've been working on the multi-story office buildings, and we had a little bit of flex product there, R&D product. The other places that we've had opportunities to do mixed-use development, we've done it in a relatively significant way. Land, obviously, as you mentioned, is hard to come by in Howard County. I appreciated the presentation that was done there that kind of showed I'd say the challenges that are there. I think I jotted down that there's about 400 developable acres, and perhaps some uncertainty as to exactly how developable that land is. We have a single project in Baltimore County that's got more acreage than that, in and of itself. So it is a bit of a challenge to find the land in Howard County. And then, of course, when that happens, it gets more expensive. I would say that the changes to the forest conservation law in the past couple of years in Howard County did raise a bar that we had, as an industry, we had been kind of working in Annapolis, as those challenges kind of came along with regard to forest conservation to kind of keep things as they were. We thought it was a good, robust program. And I guess through their lack of success at the state level, some of the environmental groups started working at the local level. They really closed the door in Anne Arundel County in a really significant way. They went so far as to protect trees that are inside of growth areas in a way that pretty unprecedented. Howard County didn't go quite that far, but it did make some challenges. So those kinds of things, where you've got limited amounts of land and then you kind of raise the bar with regard to things like that. Not that the environment's not important, but it certainly makes greater challenges in the places where you've got growth areas designated, and you've got these competing interests. Obviously, high fees, excise taxes, and things like that can create additional challenges. I don't know if that's a full answer to your question there.
Good. No, thanks, Tom. I mean, and in terms of, obviously we're in the redevelopment business, or I mean, we're projecting to be in the redevelopment business. Couple quick thoughts on what would facilitate redevelopment. Sure.
It's something that we've certainly started to look at. I'd say more and more as the market has gotten tighter. Some of the things, I mean, the obvious things, the idea of tax incentives and things like that, incentives that would help to offset some of the costs. One of the challenges you face when you go in, you showed the slide of Columbia Gateway and existing buildings, and it's not just the cost of taking down existing buildings, but the ability to acquire a property that's already got existing operating, building on it. It's generating revenue and things like that. So those values tend to drive the costs up. And so, are there ways to help to bring the values in line through incentive programs or whatever, so that it's really more like, land that you can afford to buy, if that makes sense, because you're not having to necessarily pay the full freight of the perceived value or of maybe an underperforming property or something like that. Nobody ever thinks that their building is worth less, because whether they have tenants in it or not, they still see value in it, and that's a hard obstacle to overcome. It's a similar obstacle that you overcome when you're trying to do assemblages and things like that, and especially where you've had an area that's been transitioning from perhaps residential into a more of a commercial setting. People have individual homes, and that's a hard way to try to assemble properties. So maybe programs that will work along those lines. One thing I guess just to consider is that when you're talking about real estate tax incentives, that it makes a difference if you're talking about who's kind of getting the benefit of those incentives. When you have full service buildings, then the owner is getting the benefit, meaning if you're leasing property to others, you're kind of getting the benefit of that, where it's full service setting, as opposed to where the have a triple net or something like that, where the tax is being passed through to the tenant. It's just not as attractive to the developer. So again, some of those kinds of things to think about. I was talking with Jennifer Seachuck, rather, who's our Vice President of Asset Management, the other day. I'm telling her I was preparing for this and thinking a little bit about some of these types of questions. And one of the things that she pointed out, and Larry, I think you kind of illustrated it in your slides there, the high property values in Howard County that relate to residential. The same house that I happen to live at Maple Lawn, and the same house that I live in at Maple Lawn, what I paid for that house, we're essentially building the same houses at a project called Greenlee in Baltimore County. And there's probably a $250,000 potentially difference in the value of those two houses, easily $150,000. So that's significant, because you've got a lot of that kind of product in Howard County. So when you have those high values, it's driving your assessable base for your residential. It's a little bit out of proportion just in and of itself, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so when you showed that slide that said, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but Howard County was ranked lower than Baltimore County as it relates to total assessable base for commercial. Yet when you showed the per capita, it flipped in a significant way. I think the numbers were 29,000 per capita versus
right.
17 or something like that in Baltimore County. And that really kind of shows. So one of the thoughts that I had with regard to that, thinking about, and it's maybe a little outside the box thinking, but if you wanted to incentivize commercial growth, and you think about multifamily as being commercial based because of the way that you finance that, and it's done on a cap rate as opposed to comparable sales and things like that. The idea of looking at what do you do with schools as they relate to multifamily, because you're then addressing workforce housing, which seems to be an issue everywhere. And you're bringing in something that would be working toward the commercial base. So might be one place to think about there. Obviously, you could see that there's clearly a future demand for residential housing in the county, as well as there's going to be additional job demand. That may be a place that some thought could be given to, and maybe not an expected suggestion, but it's something that I kind of was thinking about the other day, and I thought maybe something worth at least looking at. Obviously, schools have been a bit of a barrier for the for the county, the capacity and things like that. But anyway, so those are, I guess, my general thoughts on the
stuff. Good. Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
I'm going to jump over to Chuck Phillips real quick, and then Tom Ballantyne will come back. But Chuck Phillips is principal at KCI Technologies. Like I said, he's a Howard County resident, has his business here in Howard County, as well as does national work. But Chuck also is the chair of the Chamber of Commerce this year, and also sits on the board of the Economic Development Authority. So, Chuck, you've got a couple of hats here. At resident, you do stuff for companies like Tom Pilon. What are some of the things that you've been seeing in terms of business climate? How is business in Howard County compared to some of the other places you're doing stuff across the country? What facilitates or adds friction to some of the work that you're seeing?
Sure. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, so we do work all over the country, and we focus our business really on national developers, companies that are developing primarily commercial space. We do not do as much residential, but primarily commercial space. And over the last several years, that focus has been heavily in industrial and warehousing. And so our largest client is one of the largest companies in the world, as you can imagine. And I'm doing, I think we have 44 facilities on the books with them currently. And what they look at specifically as they go through the process of selecting where they're going to put their facilities is obviously access to, main corridors, but also how quickly they can get their facility in place and up and running. And that ties directly to the development process, and specifically the regulatory environment and the review process. And what we have seen in Maryland over the last several years has been multiple counties moving in a way to help facilitate that type of development getting online quicker. And in doing that, what they have done is added third-party review. So what that does is allows the developer to pay a third party to do the plan review rather than waiting on running that process through county reviewers, which can take some time, especially in busy environments. Things get stacked up, you have to wait your turn. So Prince George's County, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, all the surrounding jurisdictions around Howard County have gone to this third-party review process where they clear companies, certify them. In the case of Prince George's County, I have multiple folks in my office here in Maple Lawn that are certified reviewers, and they actually sat in the county offices for multiple weeks and work with their staff to get that status. But it gives the developers some confidence that they're going to be able to get through that process much more quickly than waiting. And, we have not done that in Howard County. And I have had clients that have gotten tied up for long periods of time in regulatory review, and other clients who just have said, no, I'm going to pass. I'm going to go into Baltimore County, into the city, or into Prince George's County, rather than where I have more certainty, rather than go through that process in Howard County.
Got it. Obviously things that, I would say, facilitate the development. We're competing against, not only other counties, but, other states, Northern Virginia, obviously. Jump over to Tom Ballantyne real quick. Tom, you represent the development community statewide. Some of the what are some of your members telling you? What are they concerned with? Obviously, if business is going to happen in Maryland, what are some of the things that they're telling you? What are they concerned about? What are they watching?
I first of all, I appreciate you all asking us to come in and talk to this group. I appreciate the challenges that the advisory committee has in sorting through how to address the future changes that the county is going through. Our members work in the District of Columbia and all the Maryland counties, but we're centrally located for the most part because of the product types. But our members develop and own commercial, industrial, mixed-use projects, and increasingly are in high-density multifamily as well. And the perception of Howard County has always been very positive. We have a great history of a solid plan that stays on track. We have a great history of competent staff and political leadership. And the questions now are how to transition from a plan that is admittedly playing itself out, right? And how you move to a redevelopment scenario and adjust to changing demographics, to the changing market conditions for office in a post-COVID world, things like that. When I look at the land supply and development capacity numbers that Jeff Bronow just covered, I look back in 2000, there were about 2,500 acres of undeveloped land. 2010, it was 1,350. Now it's give or take 400, and that's not very much. That's a short time frame, right? Where you're in a undeveloped greenfields kind of development scenario. And so the adjustment needs to happen fast. And the rules for redevelopment projects are generally more difficult. The projects themselves are more difficult, more intrusive. Tom Pilon was alluding to what I consider to be sunken costs, right? The high cost basis of existing uses. And that means that projects don't pencil out. And you're getting into a scenario where development projects don't pay, at least the first costs are difficult to a difficult hurdle. And that has to be part of the public policy discussion. When we look at, I think it's important for the county to always be cognizant of its competitive position regionally and nationally. I think if you ask most of our members right now, the most business friendly and receptive commercial development counties are Prince George's and Montgomery. And they're doing things that are inventive that Howard has a history of doing and will undoubtedly catch up to as you're working through this process. But, right now the cost structure is relatively competitive within Maryland, but Northern Virginia counties have lower transactional costs by far. Their recordation and transfer is about a third, and a piece of that takes care of transportation costs. So there are competitive balances that are changing. For years, Howard had the luxury of basically a homegrown development industry. Now, when you look at the purchases in this county, they're coming from big real estate investment trusts in Boston and New York and Chicago and Florida and San Francisco. And that money is fluid nationally, it's fluid internationally, and the competition for the high quality investor manager is really keen going forward. A few things that I think people discount the impact of. For a long time, Howard has been tapering the residential build while continuing to add jobs. And that jobs to housing balance is something that the Washington Metropolitan Council has really taken a close look at and begun to admit that they have a problem, and admit that it's going to seep into their commercial and economic development prospects for the future. They haven't really taken it as seriously in this region. And when you apply the same math to Howard County and to the Baltimore region, the shortfall of housing units is almost as large as the Washington shortfall with half the market size. So on a kind of comparative basis, it could be more acute, and that's at some point becomes a drag for attracting new business, and it becomes a transportation issue for more and more commuters coming into the county. Now, in a post-COVID world, what does transportation look like? I think that's really an open question. One thing about Forest, and I think it's certainly is a community and a jurisdictional decision about how much forest to preserve in certain locations. But the reality is that the difficulty to clear forest in your growth areas, the bar was raised. And when you make that decision, have to find ways to add back in density in the future. I'm really interested to see what priority forest looks like on those 410 remaining vacant development parcels. Because in Anne Arundel anyway, the presence of forest is becoming one of the biggest determining factors in how the form and the density of development.
Good stuff. Thanks, Tom. And you bring up a good point. I'm going to just kick it over to Leonardo quickly before we get to some questions. But that was one of the things, Leonardo. You and your legislative committee have been working a lot over the past 12, 18 months. Just kind of high level, some of the challenges that you guys have had to take a position on, representing your membership, in terms of what's maybe adding maybe friction to the commercial development market.
Excuse me. Thanks, Larry, and really appreciate all the comments that have been shared earlier and so forth. And I think really from a chamber perspective, obviously part of our role in being a business advocate is to watch and kind of monitor what's taking place both at the local level and even statewide as well. And I think one of the things that we're continuing to see, and Tom Valentine started alluding to it a little bit near the end of his comments, and that is just particularly over the last probably 2 years in particular, maybe two, we've really have probably been more active in terms of weighing in on potential legislation. And even in instances where maybe it hasn't passed, the concern is what's the message that's being sent to folks, basically that would be a NAIOP member or specifically to a St. John's Properties when, again, as it was shared, when you look at things from a context standpoint, and now if you've got, companies that are outside of Howard County that have an investment portfolio that includes Howard County, in many of their cases, when you're managing something and again, you're in essence a location on a spreadsheet, then they're not going to always have that same sense of, appreciation, for Howard County as if they lived here. And so then it becomes a case truly from a competitiveness standpoint, what makes me invest my dollars here versus say a Raleigh, a Charlotte, a Richmond, and Atlanta, and so forth. And so I think that's the thing that also we're recognizing that we're no longer just competing with Prince George's County and Montgomery County, that the conversation is moving up and down the eastern seaboard. And that's what we have to also keep in mind of. And again, even when things don't pass, what's the message that's being sent in terms of the desire to have A, development as a whole, and then B, just on the commercial side in particular. And obviously, I think we're sensitive as a chamber in particular to the challenges faced by our education entities and so forth, and the need to build additional schools and capacity and so forth. But I think simultaneously, when we think about historically, how have we built those schools? Typically, it has been as a result of a lot of the development that has taken place. And so I think the one thing that we've constantly talked about is the need to try to find some form of fashion balance. And I think we've been tipping the scales in many respects. I think recently to where it has become, I think the message is that it's been a little bit more difficult to do business. I mean, I think over the last probably couple of years, certainly as an example, APFO has been, front line and center, and we'll talk about that some here, and I mean here in the sense of not so much this conversation, but across the whole spending affordability. But I think other legislation on the environmental side, also issues as it relates to certain fees and the like. And so I think the biggest thing that I would just say as I wrap up is that as we continue to have these conversations about growth, is that A, it has to be balanced. And also, I think we have to constantly think about what is the message that we're trying to send. And that message could be, in some cases, it's not necessarily the overt message, but it's the covert message. And so I'll just kind of wrap it up there.
Good stuff. No, thanks, Leonardo. I mean, obviously, I think what you're talking about is, predictability, and, Howard's strength. Tom Valentine referenced it, has always been, kind of open, friendly, and predictable. And, we got to maintain that edge.
And if I could just add something on that, Larry, I think even, I think Tom also, I guess other Tom, the thing that he mentioned, and I think that also was key, is that the predictability is the piece that's important. That I think the business and development committee is not necessarily looking for easy, but what they are looking for is expediency and predictability. And I think if you can have those two things, they can deal with the high standards and rigor. But again, can you have a predictable process that they can move through?
Excellent. Good point. So Holly, I know you got some other things to get to, but I did want to just kind of open it up for if folks have questions of our.
Yeah, I think let's open up for at least a couple of questions there, because this is very important there. And thanks everybody. It's greatly informative and insightful. So it has a lot of implications also on the policy making. So I want to thank you all. So let's entertain a couple of questions there. Okay.
I think Richard Clinch might have had a question. There he is.
Yeah.
Hi, Rich.
Hey, Larry, how are you?
Good.
I had a question, I guess, bouncing off what Mr. Valentine said. I understand the issue that the county is running out of land. That's clear from the maps. But if what you're saying is the permitting, zoning, and entitlement process is a barrier to development, I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. And then just to set context, I'm writing Prince George's County's economic development strategy right now. I wrote Baltimore County's, and I did Frederick County's, and everybody says Howard has so I've talked to every developer working in all of those counties over the last 4 years, and they've all said permitting and zoning is predictable, is functioning well in the county. So this is a new information that Prince George's is doing it better. Could I hear a little bit about that?
Well, I think the context for my comment is about looking forward to a permitting and development and land management scenario that is primarily redevelopment and the transition to that. I think that some of the things that David Iannucci has done in Prince George's are fairly inventive. They've gotten deals done, and some of this is about the ability and the patience to nurture projects, right? I mean, it's like growing a garden. Somebody has to want it to happen and put the time into it. So I think it's a combination of those things, but it's more a forward-looking comment about how to prepare for the future.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add on to that, Tom. What we had seen over the years, and we work in Prince George's County on a daily basis. What we had seen over the years is that their process had just become very disjointed and cumbersome. And over the last several years, they went through a complete reinvention of their system, creating the DPI process and, creating some predictability in what they do by allowing, third-party review processes and other things to kind of help in areas that, frankly, they had fallen down in. So we are seeing the desire to improve. Those folks are making a concerted effort to do what they can to make that process more predictable and to give developers options that, they might not have in some other areas.
If I could, I might want to reach out to you offline just to hear a little bit about your perception there, because I'm hearing different things in that county that I don't want to take. Would that be acceptable?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
I have a question.
Barbara, go ahead.
This is maybe more of a micro question, but it went across my radar recently that somebody's looking to, offer to buy W.R. Grace. And so I'm wondering if we have any insights into what the implications might be with something like that and the tax base and other large businesses that might be being looked at. There seems to be a lot of movement in the business sector. So I'm just curious, what Larry would say about that.
Obviously, W.R. Grace, major employer, and it's something that we're watching closely. It is sort of another example, not specifically Howard County, but Maryland has sort of lost a lot of its corporate anchors over the years. Just M&A activity, but the loss of major corporate employers like that, obviously the jobs, but also their contributions, their philanthropy, it really kind of ripples throughout the community. So we're hoping that the facility here in Howard County is a major R&D facility as well. A lot of high-paying jobs and a lot of good research there. So we're hoping that its competitive advantage with its workforce talent and the work that it does, maintains its position in whatever portfolio it may end up in.
Larry, can I make a comment there? I don't know whether there are parallels to what was it, Arbitron campus?
Yeah,
that was a big Howard County employer that moved. So it came to mind when I was thinking about this call, the Grace situation, and it's about retention, right? It's about retaining and growing existing business.
Exactly.
I have a kind of, to get back to the planning. I don't know if people can hear me. This is Josh Zucker. As you're going through the planning process, obviously, COVID is top of mind because it has kind of evolved supercharged the evolution of the workplace environment to really being distance for a lot of kind of the high tech or just service economy. I work at Oracle, not in the Howard County office, but I know we have 400 and some people badged to the Oracle building in Gateway. And in the last 3 weeks, we got an email from our CEO and Larry Ellison that said Oracle is moving to, in order for Oracle to compete for talent, we're moving to work from anywhere. So the 450 people that are badged to the campus in Gateway, conceivably every one of them could decide to work from Maui or Vail or Ocean City or Columbia. At the same time, I know from living in Maple Lawn and looking at some of the development that's going on in Maple Lawn, it's not as walkable and not as I think people would have liked it to have been 20 years ago when it was in the planning stages. And part of that is the parking requirements that are incumbent upon any new development. So there's like this tension between the fact that a lot of the white collar jobs can be going completely virtual while we're still in this environment where we are parking, I don't know what it is, 3 cars for every, you guys know, but are we over parking, and can we assemble bigger parcels of land by really examining parking and also building higher? I feel like we're hamstringing ourselves if we don't take that into account going forward.
Tom Pilon, you want to start? Because you're the Maple Lawn, probably have a parking perspective, but I have a couple of comments on the question.
I guess I would. I'd start by saying I've not met you. Apparently, you're my neighbor.
Uh-oh.
But I guess I would respectfully disagree a little bit about Maple Lawn and its walkability. I find it quite walkable. I'm a runner. I feel very comfortable running there in the streets, more so than on the sidewalks and things like that. But it's certainly we have walked pretty much anywhere that we wanted to walk in the community. Perhaps not as compact as you might like it to be, and I could see it from that perspective. But that might just be differences of opinion. That's not the issue that you're raising with regard to the parking. Parking ratio is a tricky thing because it depends on the use that you get. If you get a use that's looking for like a call center and things like that, those tend to have higher needs for parking, certainly pre-COVID. Again, everybody's kind of guessing where things are going to go ultimately. Ed St. John was recently, the owner of St. John Properties, was recently interviewed and asked about some of these things, and he commented that our personal corporate headquarters, we've always had just a little more elbow room in the building by I guess our own design and comfort levels and whatever, and we may exceed what was usually kind of assumed would be 200 square feet per person, but you see buildings where they're wanting to get down to 100 square feet per person and things like that. So buildings like that have a need for parking. I think as you get into more urban settings, clearly you see the demand for the parking getting lower. But in Howard County and I would say the Baltimore region in general, we just don't have a very robust public transit system. So the idea of saying we're going to set aside vehicles and do other things, it makes it a challenge. It's nice to have that as an objective and try to get there. I've certainly traveled in countries that had that. I went to Japan a number of years ago, and I was on a vacation, and we traveled all throughout the country. And basically, I remember being in one taxi ride the whole time I was there, and we were in the metropolitan areas and traveled between large cities and things like that. I'm just not sure that it's altogether there yet. So the question about is there the capability to reduce the parking ratios and things like that, I think it's something you have to look at somewhat carefully. I would say that if you start thinking about stacking vehicles as opposed to surface parking them, meaning parking structures and things like that, the land values have to be pretty high to be able to get there. We kind of use as a rule of thumb $1 million an acre for land value. And you're not necessarily seeing that in most places, or it's got to be subsidized. And we've seen examples of that where there was some government has helped in those regards. Maybe subsidized too strong of a word, but I mean somehow incentivized or something like that. So I guess those are kind of my initial thoughts. And all of that said, Ed St. John is a strong believer that autonomous cars are going to be a real thing, and once that happens, that we're going to see a dramatic shift as a result of that and the need for parking because of the ability of cars to be able to kind of come and go as you need them. So that's, somewhat speculative, but he thinks it's a 10-year horizon, so for whatever that's worth.
I guess, I mean, just to follow up, like, nothing would, lowering our parking ratio in the county, nothing would stop St. John's from exceeding the ratio. I'm just saying, do we have a ratio that's still realistic, and is our floor too high? I mean, St. John's could continue to park beyond that ratio regardless of what the.
You're right about that. Minimum requirements, and that's an excellent point. So long as there's I would be concerned about the opposite. If they say we're going to set a upper limit, you can't exceed a certain ratio and things like that, because that can put you into a pickle of not being able to accommodate particular uses. But no, I think that idea of whether it's a valid conversation to talk about potentially lower ratios, I think that's a legitimate question. And I apologize if I missed your point on that.
Can I just add that I think that'll have a bigger impact because you have so many small parcel sizes in commercial industrial. Parking ratio, you'll either underbuild or push people into structured parking. So the sensitivity to the effect of the parking requirements is a good one. As for the dispersed office, I think, for a group that has your charge, I think you may be already doing this, but somebody needs to be doing sensitivity analysis about what happens to the commercial base, because we're coming out of a 10-year period where generally, nationwide, rents were declining in every asset class except residential, but prices were increasing a lot. And it's a byproduct of interest rates that are very low and capital chasing returns that they perceive in commercial real estate. But it's no question that there's a generational change going on in the use of office. Our members are big believers that office is more productive, it's more creative, it provides all kinds of other benefits. But we don't know, even the most ardent supporters of office and believers in its long-term viability don't know what it's going to look like, aren't really sure what their assets are worth, what their tenant base is going to look like. So that's a near-term issue to deal with, how that shakes out, and it'll have almost immediate fiscal implications for Howard County and the other urban counties in Maryland.
True. Yeah,
great.
We're watching that. We're watching that closely. It's the future of the office is a big question for us.
So one last thing on that, Josh, because it's a great question. I think what has to happen moving forward is the county has to be more receptive to kind of really looking at the use. When you have, let's say, a data center building, data centers take up large amounts of square footage inside of a building, but have very, very low parking demands. So we have to have some flexibility built into the code to allow for things like that. On the office side, like you said with Oracle, you also don't need that big of an office anymore. So I would tell you overall, the code makes sense and supports the office the way it was in the past. But now with people working from home, we don't need as much office space as we used to. Therefore, we don't need as many parking spaces as well. So that's one of those things where we're going to have to look at a balance.
Good.
Well, thank you all very much.
Can I jump in, Holly, for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Todd Arterburn here. Just to kind of hammer home, you mentioned the forest count changes in Howard County a couple of times, and on the very small scale level and the 6 to 8 single family unit developments, the forest count changes have a major impact on what can and can't be done. And in fact, we've just withdrawn from 2 contracts that we had for these smaller residential infill developments in eastern Howard County because of the forest count changes, when layered on top of APFO, make it extremely difficult to get the yield you need to keep your land costs to a reasonable level. So I thought I'd just toss that in. It's obviously a much different end of the development spectrum than what you're discussing, but it has a very real impact on smaller projects that actually do go to the issue of less expensive workforce housing that's not being developed that otherwise might be. And I don't think people realize that, that goes all the way down to that level where you have property that could otherwise be utilized for that purpose and is not able to be.
Thank you. Thanks, Todd. Well, Holly, I know we took a little bit more time, but I appreciate the time on the agenda to talk about this. I'd like to thank my panelists for joining in and adding, some perspective. It brings a rich discussion to the, and I hope, Holly, it was helpful for you and your committee.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. And I want to thank you, all the panelists. This is really great discussion, very, very helpful. And it's very important as well for committee and for the county in terms of planning and also the future economic development for the county. So this is great. And also, if there's any additional thoughts, if we're not able to fully cover it, Larry, if you can work with folks here and email us, that will be
Definitely
helpful too. Thank you so much. And also good questions from the committee, especially some of those really touch on long-term development and the regional competitiveness of the county. So it's very helpful. Thank you. We do have to move on. So our next speaker will be DTCS Director Brandy. So are you able to share from your screen? I think we can talk about, and sorry for bumping from last meeting. Go ahead.
That's okay. No worries. Thank you, Holly. I think TJ is going to pull up the presentation. So we'll have him pull that up in 1 second. While he's doing that, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Brandy Gans. As Holly mentioned, I'm the director of the Technology and Communication Services Department. So we will jump right into the presentation. Okay, so the mission of DTCS, we wanted to give you a little bit of background, and because obviously during the past year, we've had a lot of changes in direction due to the pandemic. So just wanted to give you a brief background on some of the things that we're really focusing on and we will continue to focus on moving forward. So obviously our top priority is the network and making sure that we keep our users safe and secure. There's nothing more important than that. We're improving the broadband access across the county. So we have lots of subgroups and teams that are working on things, but one of our big focuses is digital equity and making sure that everybody can have access to internet and access to services that they need, especially during this current time. We also maintaining all of our access points across the network, which closely ties to digital equity, but just making sure that, we have that availability for everyone everywhere. Prepare and enhance work capabilities from home for across the county. So we have a lot of individuals, as you can imagine, that are working from home. So we are just making sure that we have the proper protocols, the security, everything in place to allow individuals to be working from home and remote. And also we have a real focus on the development, enhancement, deployment, and support of our software applications across the county. So during this time, we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of things that are happening. So we're really focused on making sure that we have efficient processes in place in order for us to move forward. Okay, so to talk about security just a little bit. So some of the things that we've done from a security standpoint, we have enhanced our security team. So we've brought on additional staff in order to make sure that we do have a very solid and secure security team to help us to move forward. We implemented multi-factor authentication across the county, which gives us additional steps and additional security, which means that individuals, in order to get into their email or other applications, they have to authenticate and prove that they are themselves, similar to what we do at banks or other organizations. We also are completing quarterly phishing campaigns and sending them out to all staff so that individuals get an idea of the different types of fish that are out there right now. As we have seen the world drastically change within the last year, we've also seen these phishing campaigns increase, and we've seen so many different ways that people are trying to get into environment. So I think it's critical that we are reaching out to all staff. We're working with individuals in order to allow them to understand what is out there and how they can avoid those phishing techniques. We also implemented a security awareness training program. So this is something where we had everybody go through a process of being trained, which not only does it talk to phishing, but it also talks to other security matters that need to be addressed. And it gives employees and everyone the knowledge of what we need to do from a county standpoint for moving forward. In addition, we created a Howard County cross-governmental cybersecurity cooperation team. So we are working with several agencies across Howard County in order for us all to make sure that we are on the same page and everyone working together to make security a top priority within Howard County as a whole. Okay, so remote work, everybody's favorite topic lately, right? And so with remote work, we obviously had to ramp up very, very quickly. And we deployed over 900 laptops to county employees within an 8-month time frame. We were one of the first to work with HP, and we got our order in the very first day, luckily. So we were able to receive and get all of those laptops in, and we've been able to distribute them to employees across the county. We increased our bandwidth capabilities to allow individuals to be able to work remotely and to allow for, increased traffic. We also deployed soft phones on laptops across the county, allowing employees to be able to take all of their phone calls on their laptops, which has been a huge success and something that's been very beneficial. We, in the interim, we also did make sure that that phones were transferred over to individual cell phones, but this makes it much easier so that individuals can just take the phone calls directly from their laptops. We updated VMware, which is what we use to provide remote access to employees for particular applications. So we updated that and made sure that everybody could get to the necessary applications that normally would have been on-premise, and allowed them to be able to access those applications remotely. We also provided VPN access on an as-needed basis for individuals that, for some reason, if we could not provide an application to them through VMware, we allowed them VPN access, which allows them to access it from home just as if they were in the office. Okay, so during this time, it's been critical that we increased our tools and functionality and items that were available to all staff in order to be able to help us to get through this pandemic. So several of the things that we've done, we rolled out SharePoint and OneDrive across the county, which allows for data to be stored in the cloud and retrieved from anywhere. Previously, we had a lot of data that was on premise, but now we understand and we know that there's a need for data to be able to be available remotely. We created our intranet on SharePoint, which allows for us to be able to get critical information out to all individuals on the intranet, and they can access that remotely as well. We rolled out WebEx. So WebEx has been critical for the county and for remote meetings. We've had town halls, we've had all kinds of events that have happened via WebEx and Teams as well. So to date, and I apologize because this is a little bit out of date. This was as of January 6th, but as of January 6th, we had over 1,500 public meetings that had been held through WebEx. We had over 28,744 internal meetings that had been held remotely. And then we had over 174,000 total participants that have attended meetings to date. So, I think WebEx and Teams have been critical for our organization. And it's been very important to have those for moving forward and allowing the availability for individuals to be able to talk to each other remotely and be able to share and see documents and do various things. It's been extremely critical for everyone. So we also created the Stay COVID Safe dashboard, which provides residents and media up-to-date information on the pandemic response. We did, along with the COVID dashboard, we also created we worked with Quest in order to create for government employees a form to allow them to go to get COVID antibody testing. Okay, so as we have been going through this whole process, we've also been looking at the rationalization and application of tools because, you know, as we move forward, we see that maybe some tools that we had used in the past may not be needed in the future, or we may be able to use them in different capacities. So one of the first things that we did was we have created an IT steering committee. And that IT steering committee is reviewing all projects and everything that is coming in from an IT standpoint, and we're aligning it to the pillars that the county executive had put out. So we're really making sure that the projects and initiatives that we're working on tie to the importance of the pillars and what the county executive would like us to be working on and what we should be focusing on for the county as a whole. We're looking at and we are eliminating unnecessary or redundant tools and applications. So I know, for instance, one of the things that we had done before was we did a lot of printing in the offices. Well, now we see that the printing has gone down. So we're looking at ways to remove printers, or we've deployed, and it's a little bit further down, but we've deployed DocuSign and Adobe Acrobat for those reasons, so that individuals do not have to necessarily use as much printing, and they don't have to come into the office to print and sign documents. Everyone can now do those types of things electronically. We've also seen some workflows where we could take those workflows that were done manually previously, and we can put them into a system to allow for faster and more efficient workflows. We deployed several maps throughout the process of the pandemic, which are being displayed to the public. So we have several COVID maps, and then we have food maps. We have the farms map. We have, you know, lots of other various maps that we put out there so that individuals could know and understand what was happening here in Howard County during the pandemic. And you can drill into the maps. You can look at information that directly correlates to you or your area or your zip code so that you know how to respond for yourselves moving forward. Okay, so I wanted to briefly talk about some of the challenges that we have in IT. As I know, we've talked a lot about some of the stuff that we've done, but these challenges are something that are here to stay, and they're going to impact IT, and they're going to impact some things as we move forward. So one, as everyone knows, the industry continues to evolve very quickly, and things continue to change and adapt on a daily basis. So we have to meet those needs, and we have to continuously make sure that we are up to date, that we're doing everything we can in order to keep us secure. Security costs are mounting because threats are increasing in their sophistication and scope. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the phishing threats and the various things that are coming in are not what it was 2 years ago, not even what it was a year ago. People are becoming much more knowledgeable about how to send campaigns, how to send things. They're targeting social media. They're targeting other areas where we know that everybody is going to in order to be able to get into organizations. So we have to make sure that we are prepared, and that does mean that that there are going to be new costs, including software, hardware, and implementation, and we're going to have to be prepared to go to the next level to make sure that we continue to keep our environment secure. These new costs have an impact on our operating budget in subsequent years. So for right now, we have been able to handle those costs and absorb some of those costs. But in future years, they will have an impact to us because we do have to make sure that a lot of the stuff that we're deploying has to continue to be maintained. We have licenses fees, we have subscription fees, and other information to make sure that we have to maintain in order to keep our environment stable and secure. We have to support new skill sets and training as needed. So as things evolve, the additional training and the information that's needed from staff and the knowledge, we have to make sure that we're able to transfer and deliver that to individuals. We continue to work on the security awareness and make that a priority throughout the county. And not only are we making it a priority for us, but that's that whole group that we were talking about, so that we really understand and know as a county, Howard County is safe. And then it's very hard to keep and attract talent because there's a high demand within the area that we live in the Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area. It's very difficult with private sector and with other individuals because they can offer higher salaries, and and individuals are going to where the higher salaries are being paid. So we're doing everything we can to keep and attract talent, but it is something that is difficult, and it will be an ongoing challenge. So I just wanted to give you an idea on some of the things looking forward from an IT standpoint of what we need and how we're going to be moving forward. So for the initial response to the pandemic, we were able to fund it through our existing budget and CARES Act funding. But in future years, and this is what I was referring to just a moment ago, for the ongoing maintenance and support and the upgrades and those things, we will need to make sure that that's budgeted for. And we will need to make sure that we're able to continue and sustain what we have, and in addition, add on to as threats, as things increase within the county. And then as the pandemic response and transition to remote work evolves, we anticipate that the technology needs are also going to evolve, and there's going to be new things that are going to be needed, and we're going to have to be able to deploy and work with individuals and get that out quickly to staff and personnel. So, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that security is and always will be our top focus as we move forward, and we're doing everything that we can to ensure that Howard County is safe and secure. And with that, Holly, I will open it up to any questions if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brandy. We can maybe take 1 or 2 questions, then we're going to move on to community college. Thank you, Brandy. I think, Brandy, you did an excellent job. You probably answered everybody's potential questions there. All right. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot of challenge, by the way. Thanks for supporting all of us in the county.
Thank you.
And for so the host, can you hand it over to Brooke Memo, and he's going to run the slides for community college, and Lynn Coleman will be our next speaker. And by the way, for housekeeping, we are running out of time, so the community college has gracefully agreed to present at our next week's meeting. Our next week will be the school superintendent's proposed budget, library systems budget, and also economic outlook. Not library, community college.
Well, Holly, do you want me to do it next week?
No, I can. Can a host put the screen for me? I actually have the information already pulled out on the screen for the community college. I can do it now.
I mean, I can do it next week, or I can do it now. It doesn't matter.
No, we can do it now.
Okay,
Thank you so much. All right, can everybody see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. Then you're
Okay.
on.
right.
Thank you for
So
your
I'm-
patience, by the way.
Okay, I'm happy to talk to you again about the community college as we celebrate our 50 years of service, and everything we do relates to our mission, vision, and values and goals. So if you can go to the next slide. Our business model on the next slide is we have varying levels of students, and so we have to have opportunities for them to learn at different levels. We also have different diverse learning options available. So on the next slide, you can see some of our options that we have put in place that I think we've mentioned before with our hybrid learning, our scheduled remote, and our flexible online courses. And I think a lot of this will continue into the future along with in-person classes. Our student enrollment on the next slide talks about how we are broken out. Our majority is our credit students, but our part-time students make up the bulk of our head count. So we try to move forward and promote things for part-time students and make things flexible for them. The next slide shows some statistics on our enrollment. We have over 106 countries. 44% of our credit students receive financial aid. 24% of the students are recent Howard County graduates that graduated this past year. In our non-credit area, last year trained over 8,700 students in workforce training. The average age of our student is 25, and in our credit area and in our non-credit area, it's 36. On the next slide, you can show what percentage of Howard County residents attend Maryland institutions as undergrads. And so 39% of those are at Howard Community College. And then you can see next is University of Maryland College Park and on to UMBC. So you can see where our county residents in undergrad are spread out. Our next slide shows our funding, and this the funding, 40% is tuition and fees, 37% from the county, and 20% from the state. Our next slide shows the growth. Since 2005, we have grown 37%, and we have the highest growth of any community college in Maryland, and the next closest to us is Frederick at 22%. And moving on, you can see the projections, what we have for the future years. Our head count is expected to grow 10.5% in the next 5 years and about 19% in the next 10 years, with the credit area being the fastest growing area at 28% and non-credit at about 4%. Some of the impacts that we've had with the COVID-19, obviously, I had mentioned earlier that we had a reduction with the state of about $3 million. Our non-credit area, which has a lot of in-person classes, kids on campus, senior activities, any in-person training for businesses, that has dropped significantly because of COVID. And also, obviously, we can no longer do international programs. We've had a lot of virtual programs, but we had a lot of programs where people would go abroad, and we had classes going abroad and studying. We've lost money in our bookstore and vending, and obviously our cafeteria, which was closed partially during all of this. But some of the things that we've done to help the county, we have tried to graduate nursing students sooner. 67 students graduated in December, and we anticipate another 80 graduates earlier than usual in the spring. Our budget reductions, one of the things we did before COVID-19 started was to look at ways that we could reduce our budget. And so we did a major RPK study that started prior to the pandemic, looking at our academic programs, reviewing class sizes and our offerings to see what we could reduce and how we could save money. And we're continuing to do that. But that has helped us save about $500,000 in personnel. We also are looking at facility savings. Some of this is utilities, but other things that we could do. And regretfully, we had to close our Children's Learning Center. We did not want to do that, but we were subsidizing that for about $400,000 each year, and that became a cost we couldn't continue to have when the majority of the participants in the Children's Learning Center were not our students. Operating budget issues that we see in FY22, The state funding will continue always to be an issue. Our merit increases in adjunct faculty and part-time faculty ratios. I'll talk a little bit about that. Yesterday, the governor released his budget, and on the next slide, you can see there's a mandated allowance of 23 million, and that with the BRFA, which is the Budget Reduction Act, was reduced to 20, and so it's about almost a $3 million reduction. This is higher than the reduced amount we got this year, but it's still lower than our budget was built on this particular year. So we're very happy we were able to get, I think it is an increase of about 5% over the reduced amount. So we are happy that we got some funding because of the governor. We will, and the legislature obviously has to pass that. But one of the things, the formula on the next slide shows that the community college formula, it's really built on a combination of things. There's fixed cost and growth. And because our growth has been so high, we actually get less per FTE than all the other community colleges in the state when you look at our growth for FY20, because we've grown so fast, and the formula does, even though it rewards growth, but it's only partially rewarding growth. Our other challenge is our merit increase, which is on the next page. If you could skip over to the next page. And you can see last year, obviously, I'm sure a lot of people did not get raises because of we anticipated COVID-19. So only 3 community colleges had raises last year. But what we see on the next slide is that Howard, over the last few years, over the last 6 years, we have not had the raises that other counties have had, and that has hurt us because people have left to go to other locations as the salaries go up. So we're number 8 in the state, and over the last 6 years, our raises have only gone up a cumulative amount of about 1.9%. And you can see on the next slide where our faculty have compared to the other schools. We actually have dropped in ranking because we went from 4th to 7th in the state as far as what our faculty are making at the various levels, professor, associate professor, and we're competing against these schools to get people in. Our adjunct faculty, which is on the next slide, has also been lower than the state. And even though in level 1, that is the majority of where our adjunct faculty are, about 65% our adjuncts are in level 1, and about 17 in level 2 and 18 in level 3. But we actually have a location with Prince George's Community College, and so we have faculty members at Prince George's who are teaching with Howard who are getting paid more in the same location for services. We have also had the challenge of trying to, the state has a mandate on the next slide of having a 50-50 ratio for your full-time and part-time faculty. And each year we've tried to work on that. We've grown each year, so we are getting closer to the state guideline on the 50-50 ratio. So one of our other big initiatives is our partnership with the public school system. This is the public schools are both a supplier and a partner to us. And we have the public school students have the ability to take classes both in the school system and on our campus. And so we have 2 levels of that, and 50% discount is given to every student in the high schools to take our classes. So this past year, you can see on the next slide, we actually have increased our dual enrollment students. In the spring. We had about 1,500, and now we're up to 1,700 this past fall. So that was a 15% increase, and that is actually the second highest in the state when it comes to dual enrollment. We're proud on the next slide of our Malcolm Baldrige Award that was received last year, but we also have on the next slide other awards that we've continued to receive. Great colleges to work for. We've gotten that for 12 consecutive years. We just got that again this year. And the Bellwether Award is something we received because of our activity with Futures Assembly. And this is about our cloud computing and a number of things that we have moved to the cloud to help save money on our campus. Our board has received awards, and we've also gotten equity awards. And so when you look at the overall return on investment on the next slide, our graduates earn about $428,000 more than a high school graduate would. They have a 9.4% return on their investments and 4.6% taxpayer return on the dollars that are invested in the college, along with the jobs that we return to the county. So I tried to do that quickly.
And you're very successful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
Right.
And also I like the fact that you have a lot of data. So I think that's what the committee really enjoys in general. Any questions for Lynn on community college?
Yeah, hi. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Lynn, could you talk a little bit more about the closing of the child care center? I know this made the news at the time. Was the college subsidizing the child care center before COVID or?
Oh, absolutely. We had every year, that 400,000 actually was the prior year's amount. So over the past, since the child care center opened, and it's probably been almost 20 years, we had subsidized it about $5 million. So, and what we found was it was the growing population was not our students, it was community members that we were subsidizing. So we felt like we were there for our students, you know, we needed to put the money toward our students.
Got it. And that was what I was going to ask next, is that there's some kind of structural, reason that you felt that it needed to go towards students more than community members. Thanks.
Any other questions? So then I have a quick question, like for community college, because of the COVID, I know you guys have to make some changes on academic programs, online, etc. There, do you anticipate any of those to continue, or you anticipate largely go back to the normal? What is the plan of community college?
For this spring semester, we are continuing, along with most of the other community colleges, a hybrid model where the majority of classes are actually scheduled remote. They are not on campus. Hybrid is mainly in our labs that we're having classes, but we're hoping for the summer and fall to go back to an opening where we have more students on campus and it's not just the hybrid model anymore. So.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so we're almost right on time, and thanks to community college, community college, yes, thank you for the presentation, and all our guest speakers today. Is very informative, a lot of good information, good discussion, and thanks our library system for agreeing to delay their presentation to next week. So any further discussion from the committee before we wrap up? If no, I will see you all on Thursday next week. Thank you very much.